Everybody associates travel with feelings of complete happiness and a belief that, at least for them, everything will go swimmingly. But sometimes it doesn't quite work out that way. And in our case, sometimes it really doesn't. Prior to going to New Zealand, someone said to me, "Oh, just remember, you're only 24 hours from home at any given point." How wrong they were. So this story starts at the beginning of October 2019. Yes, that glorious year where we were trotting around completely oblivious of what was about to come. A cough was just a cough, and there was hardly a face mask in sight. My then girlfriend Meg and I were about to embark on the trip of a lifetime, a year-long working holiday in New Zealand, and the first step was just getting there with a daunting flight time of just over 24 hours and a connection in Qatar. I remember the nervous energy and excitement when we were boarding that first plane, Manchester to Doha with Qatar Airways, and the flight took around 7 hours 30 minutes. A bit of fatigue did creep in when we were waiting for our connection at Doha Airport. We had around a 3-hour layover, and the thought that there was another 17 plus hours to go was pretty brutal. At the time of flying, the 14,526 kilometres from Doha to Auckland was the longest flight in the world, and I won't sugarcoat it, it was long. The whole thing felt like a bit of a blur. Neither of us could sleep, and I made the dumb mistake of thinking that when we hit the shores of Western Australia that, oh, can't be too long to go. Yeah, that was wrong. How about another 6.5 hours? Anyway, we made it. And the next few days went a lot smoother than anticipated. We got really lucky with our Airbnb and stayed with a really nice family in Point Chevalier. They even let us walk their wonderful dog, Bella. The stay helped us recalibrate from any lingering jet lag, explore a bit of Auckland, open our New Zealand bank accounts. And whilst in Auckland, we managed to visit Tiritiri Matangi, which is a great trip. It's a haven for rare and exotic birds. Lovely boat ride over. And after around 10 days or so, we finally saw the car that we wanted to buy. Meet Glacier, a stunning 2006 Honda Airwave with ridiculously low mileage that had recently been imported from Japan. There are a lot of things that I wish I could have brought home from New Zealand, but Glacier was top of the list. She never let us down. So it was time to begin the adventure properly. And the first stop along the way was Coromandel. We hoped that our car would be ready early in the day so that we could get moving, but I remember them saying it would be ready between 9 and 5. Typically, we got a call at 4:45 saying that it was ready, meaning that some night driving would almost be certain. Something I was hoping to avoid, as I'd heard the roads into Coromandel were pretty windy and poorly lit, and they were exactly that. Nevertheless, we made it. And we were staying with Meg's aunt and uncle and Gemma. We stayed for 2 weeks, and in that time we visited some of the nicest beaches either of us had ever been to. New Chums, Cathedral Cove, Hot Water Beach. And some of my favourite memories of Coromandel were simply the woodland walks that were home to some of the kauri trees, and you'd often unexpectedly stumble across a waterfall. I could totally see why Meg's family had moved out there. And Meg's uncle was showing us spots where he liked to fish and swim, and told us a few shark tales as well. After a couple of weeks there, we got accepted for a hospitality job down in Fox Glacier on the South Island. So me, being the planner that I am, began drafting up a route down there that could incorporate a few tourist must-sees over the space of 7 days. First stop was a brief night in Tauranga. I don't really remember much from Tauranga, if I'm honest, because we got there late again. We did manage to have a walk along the beach, but didn't manage to get up Mount Manganui as it was starting to get dark, and the views are supposed to be immense from up there. So I'd love to go back. The Airbnb we stayed in was probably the worst of the whole trip. I do remember that. You could feel every single spring from the mattress below. It was an early start the next morning because it was time for Hobbiton, which didn't disappoint. A must visit for any Lord of the Rings fans. I cover Hobbiton in more detail on one of my recent videos, which I'll link at the end. From there, it was 2 days in Taupo. My wife and I are both earth signs, so I felt very at home in Taupo with powerful hydroforce at Hooker Falls, geothermal activity, lakes, and a lot of greenery. I really liked Taupo and could have easily spent more time there, but as we were on a tight schedule, it was time for the long 5-hour, 15-minute drive down to Wellington. Now, Wellington was my favourite city in New Zealand, and this was a brief introduction before we returned to live there for a few months, and I'll discuss that in my next video. We had another amazing Airbnb in Wellington where we gained a new best pal in Pickle. Look at him, what a legend. and we were able to explore the city centre, the botanical gardens, and have some unreal tacos at a place called Buquita before boarding the ferry with Gloria over to the South Island. Our trip over the Cook Strait was smooth sailing, and we had beautiful weather coming in through the Marlborough Sounds into Picton, after which we had a 2-hour 30-minute drive to our Airbnb in Motueka in Abel Tasman. This was probably our favourite Airbnb of the whole trip. It was a farm with all sorts of wildlife running around. We had chicks, or chocks if you're Kiwi, alpacas and some cats that were hilarious. It was a stunning farm close to the coast, and I don't think we were expecting to spend just as much time as we did roaming the grounds and spending time with the animals. It was great. We had every intention of revisiting Abel Tasman on the trip, but it wasn't to be. New Zealand has so much to see that you really need many trips to cram it all in. Next up was our drive down the west coast to Fox Glacier. I was amazed at how quickly the landscape changed once we left Abel Tasman. We stopped in Hokitika for a night to break the journey up, and there was plenty of stops along the way. We arrived in Fox Glacier and started our hotel jobs assisting with housekeeping, gardening and general cleaning. We lived on site whilst doing this, and I got a second job working in the general store. We spent a lot of time down at Lake Matheson. There's a really nice circular walk down there and a stunning lake with Mount Cook and the glacier in the backdrop. The jobs were going pretty well, and we intended to be there for about 3 months. However, I had been warned about the West Coast weather prior to going there from Meg's uncle. But even with that warning, I wasn't prepared for what was to come. It rained biblically for weeks and weeks, culminating in a massive storm which created 2 landslides, one to the north and one to the south, meaning we couldn't get in or out. There was significant damage to phone lines, meaning that we couldn't call anybody, there was no internet, and an obvious reduction in work hours due to a lack of tourists being able to come in and out. So we decided that as soon as one of the roads became available, it was time to move on. The South Road eventually became available after 6 days or so, and we decided to head towards Queenstown. Meg was frantically checking her phone to see if a signal would pop up, and finally, once we got to Haast, a bar popped up and we pulled over to let our families know that we were, in fact, alive. Fortunately, Meg's sister had seen a news article online about the landslides and the damage it caused to phone lines, so they assumed that this was the case anyway. We had a brief stop in Wanaka, and Lake Hawea was a tonic, and some nice relaxing swims there, and the next stop was Queenstown. I'll always remember that first drive down the Crown Range Road. The views were unreal, and the forecast for the foreseeable was looking great. It was also about a week before Christmas. And it was the first time either of us had been in a warm, sunny climate in December before, so it felt pretty alien. We were living in Shotover country, which is just on the outskirts of Queenstown and has amazing views of the Remarkables and aircraft descending through the Shotover Valley on their approach to Queenstown Airport. We initially worked a number of jobs with temp agencies to get started. I did everything from washing cars to housekeeping. The worst was easily working in a buffet restaurant, although I think we just got unlucky with where we were sent. The manager's attitude was something you had to witness to believe. But we eventually became settled for a time. Meg was working in a hotel in Queenstown Centre. She really enjoyed it, and I found some work in the trade, painting and decorating. We spent a lot of time over Christmas seeing the sights and always looking up. However, waking up on January 1st to orange skies as a result of the Australian wildfires should have been a warning sign for what was to come in 2020. But anyway, the rest of January went well. It was great warm weather. I even got to sit in a pool on my birthday. We were both enjoying the weather alongside working full time. That was until the end of the month when I started feeling an unusual rumbling in my lower abdomen, which didn't pass, it just got angrier. I went to Queenstown Hospital, who did an ultrasound.
This can't be happening. But it is.
And they saw enough inflammation to decide with my appendix. It was determined it needed to come out. The timing was magnificent, as the nearest hospital was 2 hours 30 away in Invercargill. So they got me in an ambulance and we had a ride up the Devil's Staircase. And that's not a metaphor or anything, the road is actually called the Devil's Staircase. Meg was in the ambulance with me and was somewhat comforted by a rainbow that was following us up said Devil's Staircase. I had a 3-day wait in the ward as well before the surgery could be done, which was pretty grim. The reason being that it just so happened there was a weekend, a motorsport weekend, which was quite prominent in Invercargill. Basically, a lot more people than usual with serious injuries. Like I said, magnificent timing.
Unbelievable, Jeff!
Fortunately, Meg found a nice couple nearby with an Airbnb who were great, giving her lifts around Invercargill to get what she needed. And that was super reassuring, as it really did seem to drag on. Anyway, lo and behold, surgery was done. I was tripping like I've never known when I came out of that surgery. I remember seeing space dust and planets around Meg's head when I got back to the ward. And there was a nurse that kept coming by with the name tag Zephyr. And that blew my mind. I never heard a name like that before. I think Meg found it all super entertaining. I was massively enjoying the trip, to be honest. And that was until I realised I couldn't pee.
What did you say?
Like literally, I needed to go, but nothing was happening. It was like everything was still asleep. And then the nurse delivered the most sobering sentence I've ever heard in my life. If nothing happens, we'll probably need to fix you with a catheter. All of a sudden, we spent a frantic 30 to 45 minutes Googling different methods to make it happen. It wasn't looking good until we found a suggestion to basically splash warm water on my under area whilst attempting to go at the same time. And thank the Lord, it worked. The noise of relief that I let out, someone in the next room probably thought I'd just given birth. We were both super relieved to be discharged and end up getting a scenic minibus ride back to Queenstown. After a few weeks of relaxing and healing, it was back to work. Well, for a little while anyway.
Stay at home.
Make sure you like and subscribe, because in part 2, let's just say, things don't exactly settle down.
Guys, look, there's a rare penguin. One like you've never seen.
See you next week.